Welcome back to another Let's Discuss, guys. On this one, we're going to be talking about acts of kindness. As always, I'm joined by Keenan Hart, the co founder of Francis, and we're going to talk about acts of kindness, why they're so important to us, some things you can do about them. So, as always, let's dive right into it here with Keenan. Why is it so important to you, man?
Man, acts of kindness not only are things that give us the ability to create connections with others, but I feel like acts of kindness are literally boiled into our DNA, right? When we talk about creating community, fostering connection, it is acts of kindness, from my perspective, that give us kind of like a native understanding of our primal being. Right. I think about the days when we were in the caves. I think about the days when we were hunting on the savannah, when we were for hunters and gatherers, when we were doing things that were nice for others. It was such an amazing way to be able to build a sense of community. And I think today we are still so hardwired to receive acts of kindness and look at those in a positive light. And it's just like kind of hits on like the soul of who we are as like human beings, right? I think that's so cool. So that's why this topic is so important to me, because it's at the fundamentals of our DNA.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of people out there who say that we as human beings are a tribal culture. It's so ingrained in kind of who we are. My first thought on this when I started with it was the first time I noticed how much of an impact we have on other people around us. I was quite young at the time. This is back when I was a whitewater rafting guide. I was taking a group down the river, and we came to this section of the river where kind of we've gone past all the extreme whitewater into this beautiful calm section. We come out, there's a beautiful cliff face on the one side, and it kind of gets very quiet and serene for a while. And this kid in front of me turns around and looks at me and he says, "I just want to say thank you." And I said, "Oh, like for what?" And he goes, "For showing me that somebody my age can do something that they love doing."
Wow.
And it floored me for a second. And it wasn't really until afterwards, because I was like, "Oh, well, like, thanks a lot." And it wasn't until afterwards that I was talking to some coworkers about this. And they were like, "Well, that group was a group of troubled youth. So they'd grown up on the streets of the city, they had hardships. So just me being nice and engaging with them and treating them like any other person, like, completely reshaped, that kid's point of view. And it really goes to show how something that we do that seems very small and part of our day can have this huge, massive impact on all around us.
And that's why I think, being a participant in the act of kind, like, just being kind to others is beneficial for not only the person who's receiving it, but imagine how good it also felt for that kid who gave you that compliment, because it's not
Mm,
just a one-way street, but he probably saw intuitively how you kind of sparked up and like receive that moment. And so it's not only about receiving, but it's also about being a giver of kindness as well. And it's like a two-way street that's so beneficial for two people.
100%. And it's so funny that you say that, because in digging for this, I was looking at a study, and I'm going to have to actually look at the numbers here. But it was a while ago, it was in 2017. They did a huge study on 10,000 people. It was one of the biggest kind of longevity studies on this. And it was on a control group that volunteered at least once a month and a control group that didn't volunteer. And that control group that volunteered at least once a month, that's what they termed as kind of consistent volunteering, had like significantly lower levels of depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. And they were doing social work, so it was helping others.
Mhm.
But what they said after looking at it, where they were like, it wasn't necessarily the helping others that made them feel so good. It was the way that they felt as well giving, right? Because
Yes.
it boosts like their self-esteem, it gives them a sense of purpose, and it kind of almost builds a level of confidence as well.
I mean, and let's get really deep into it, right? When I was looking up some of the stuff about this topic, I'm talking about the natural hormones that get released, the endorphins, right?
Mm.
Oxytocin that gets released into the system when we are giving out the good feelings that we look to receive from others. And it's like, I think that once again kind of gets back to our like primal DNA. Right? You are rewarded not only for how other people view you when you provide acts of kindness, but we have an internal system that also gives us the ability to lean into some of those things by being rewarded with those feel good hormones. And that's just like, at our human basis of who we are as a tribe, as a species. And I think that's so cool to kind of lean into and like tie that into lower levels of depression, lower levels of,
Yeah.
being sad, anxious, all of those things as well.
That's incredible that our body is sort of designed to encourage us to do it. And it you just touched on it. It encourages those release of those endorphins and those chemicals and those hormones in our bodies that make us feel better and help us through what we are very much aware of, the kind of mental health crises that we are having in society. Part of the solution for that is these acts of kindness. It's so incredible, like you said, how that's built right into our body and right into our DNA. It shows how
Yeah.
important it is.
I mean, I love that. And that's kind of like, from a business perspective, why I'm so passionate about what we do at Francis, because we are serving those little interruptions, those little tiny moments that help us spike that dopamine, spike those endorphins, those feel good hormones. Because if you can get the body interacting, not just the mind, in a process of gratitude, of kindness, then you have the ability to kind of transform the path that people are on. Right. And I think that that's just like so powerful to recognize how small things can have such a big impact on the way we view the world. And that's just so cool.
Yeah, this when we decided to talk about this, one of my first thoughts was what you guys do at Francis with the daily text messages that come in and they break up that pattern kind of the day. And this is another thing that I think is really important with kind of random acts of kindness, that they kind of disrupt the day. And there's a huge value to disrupting a cycle, whether it be, especially if it's a negative cycle, because a negative cycle generally your body will get stuck in,
Mm.
right? You get lost in that loop of it. But if somebody comes in and, or if you even are doing something outwardly and you kind of break that cycle, it allows you to then leave that cycle and kind of go and, move on to more positive things. And what you guys are doing is, I think, such a great example of that.
No, I really appreciate that. But it's like, it's true. I mean, like, once again, this kind of gets back down to the human experience. Like, I've been in a bad mood, right? I feel like my day's not going well. My mind keeps harping and repeating on these feelings and emotions that I have. But then I'll be in the store and someone be like, hey, man, I really love your shoes. Those are awesome. And like instantaneously, like my brain focuses on something different and I get snapped into a completely different perspective. And I'm like, you know
Mm-hmm.
what? If that person gives me a compliment, I guess what I'm dealing with really isn't that bad. And it's just proof of like those small little things, those
Mm.
interruptions can be so powerful.
I like that. And I love how it's something that, randomly can occur throughout your day. And I think something that we should like encourage more. And I think a lot of us are afraid of what others will say or feel when we do something, when we
Hmm.
approach that act of kindness, right? But like you just showed, it feels great for the person receiving it. Like it completely makes your day. So I think people don't need to be afraid necessarily of how they will come across if they're doing these acts of kindness, because you really are helping the other individual, and you're probably helping people around as well. Like if people see somebody doing something good, just the act of watching somebody do something good can make you kind of have that belief that things are going to be better and there are good people out there.
Yeah, you can easily be that domino. You know what I mean? Like, once again, we talk about like the science and the endorphins and everything. Like, we as a human species are meant to search out things that make us feel good. And it doesn't always have to be an action, but it can be observing something that somebody else is doing as well. And I feel like we should encourage each other to start building that momentum and like being that one domino that can really trigger the activities of better behavior, lifting each other up around us, because we need that more so than ever.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing too that people tend to get stuck on with acts of kindness is, because this is a common thing that we've seen across social medias all over the place, is like, oh, paying for people's coffee, or you see the rich business guy who gives the waitress $1,000 tip,
Yeah.
and people are like, oh, I can't do that. I don't have enough money to, I struggle to buy a coffee for somebody else. But there are so many other ways that you can do it that aren't monetary. And you touched on one really well there, which is just give people like a compliment. Say, hey, I like your shoes. Like it's that
Yeah, I
easy.
mean, it can even be smaller than that, because the last two moments that I think of naturally in my mind that were acts of kindness that someone else blessed me with were literally just smiling at me with
Mm.
like a genuine intent just to be happy and look at me. There was an older guy. I was in Costco the other day, turned the corner. This guy was ear to ear, just smiling at me like one of the happiest people in the world. I literally was almost like taken back by it. And I was like, okay, I don't know what to do, but like this makes me feel good. And that moment stuck with me. The other time I was walking into the gym, a girl walked past me and just had the nicest smile on her face. And once again, that took me back because that wasn't something I normally experience. In this world of instantaneous communication and our addiction to our devices, everybody is always looking down at this thing, even if it's not to do anything, it's just a behavior. And so when someone's out of that, when someone's different from that, it's just so impactful because it really makes you pay attention and kind of wonder what's going on with them and how do I get a little bit of what they're feeling.
Smiling is such a cool thing because there's a really neat concept that happens in our brain. It's not a concept, it's a thing that happens in our brain. It's called mirror neurons. So it's this thing, and everybody's experienced this. If you're listening, you've seen this happen when somebody smiles at you, when somebody yawns. If you're watching a sporting game and somebody gets tackled really hard, you feel that a little bit. And there's actually neurons in your brain that will fire. They've proven this. There's electrical impulses that fire in the same places in your brain where that pain, that pleasure, whatever it is, would come from.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's why smiling actually makes you feel better, makes you want to smile, because a small little part of your brain releases those little bits of endorphins, and then you smile and it snowballs and you feel better.
I love that. I love the
Yeah.
fact that you continue to bring in the science behind this stuff, right? Because like we've talked about in previous conversations, a lot of this feels kind of, intangible. But when we really talk about the science behind this and why we feel the things we feel when we experience these human experiences, it just kind of hammers it home so much more for me. And I'm
Hmm.
always glad that you bring like that twist to the conversation.
I love it. I love getting the science behind it for those reasons, right? Because and it's neat, and I love how you are so aware of the impact that a lot of it can have, and that's amazing as well. And then when you can back that up with some science, I think it makes a really really interesting case for stuff like random acts of kindness, and for people who are struggling, because I get it. It can be hard to step out of your shell. Maybe you're a very introverted person. Maybe you don't even like to smile at other people. I would encourage you to start with people you know. That way, it's a lot easier to start doing it. Start with your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad. Have your friends over for supper and do something special for them during that time. I think that's an easy way to start doing it. It feels much more approachable than a random stranger in public.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to build that momentum we're talking about, right? Right. When we start in our own circle, the areas that we're comfortable with, like eventually we're going to want to kind of expand and grow upon that. And so being
Mm-hmm.
able to kind of increase that reach is super important. So I love that action tip.
Is there anything that you can think of that you do kind of throughout your days or weeks that kind of makes people happy?
One of the things I think about is I love being a person who holds open the door. Right. I go to the gym and like there's always people flooding in at the same time. And I feel like once again, people are often so distracted on their devices that often we don't take the 2 seconds that it takes to kind of open the door for somebody. And so I love being the person who will like walk up and then pause at the door, open it up and be like, come on in. Because often people are like, oh my gosh, no one's done that for me in a long time. I really appreciate that. And if that's something that I can do, which is small, right, it takes an extra second, but that changes how somebody carries themselves into the next moment, the next hour, the next interaction, then that's a great way for us to kind of create that snowball effect.
Yeah, and it'll often cause them to look up from their phone as well, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, like the door's open.
Yeah,
Thanks so much. I
exactly.
appreciate that.
And because I'm so tall, right, they really have to like look up and it's like a super, exposing moment for them, which is really cool.
Oh, I love that. I love that. As we wrap up here, one of my biggest takeaways that you said quite early on in this conversation actually is when you brought up this concept that it's something that is so ingrained in our bodies from thousands of hundreds of thousands of years ago, in that communal feeling that humans have to have. It's such a core part of what we are. That to me goes to show how important it is to have these random acts of kindness, and that for me really shows why it's so important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when it's something that doesn't come from our outward environment, but something that's sparked through our hormones, through how our body naturally reacts to certain behavior, I think that that's something that we should take note of and kind of lean
Mm,
into that experience on how we create more of those opportunities. So that's what it is for me too.
definitely. Yeah, I remember my favorite quote to wrap this up is this concept that if everybody makes somebody else smile, that is a thing that could literally change the world. So that's what I'll leave us with here. Thank you guys for listening, for tuning into this. As always, this was Let's Discuss. Today we were chatting about random acts of kindness or just acts of kindness in general. Thanks again, Keenan, for coming on and sharing with us all your wisdom. I encourage everybody, go check out Francis, go check out what Keenan's doing on all his socials. It's a very good place to find those bits of kindness throughout the day. You're always sharing them. So thanks for that, Keenan. As always, guys, if you like this, go out there, make somebody else smile today, and check out what else we're doing. Thanks, guys.